God, would your love adopt me with all my brokenness and shame? Growing up in my household, it was very dysfunctional because my parents would always have these really terrible arguments. But the arguments really got worse when my grandparents on my dad's side had both passed away in the same year. So that really took a toll on my dad. They would use the money for uh, drugs instead of paying the bills. And so we wouldn't have water or electric for like years at a time. And little kids were really rude to me and like, oh, you wearing the same clothes, or oh, you stink or something. And so like I would always have to like come home and be like shameful for like my family, and it was really tough because my parents didn't know and they didn't really care. It was really hard as a little kid because I never had like attention. My oldest brother actually had moved out when he was like 16, and then my sister and we shared the same room, but I would always get kicked out, or she would always spend the night at a friend's house, and so I would always be by myself. And I just remember those nights were just so lonely, and especially where there was no like electric or water, so I had nothing to do and I barely had friends. And so once I got into middle school is when my depression got worse, because after all the bullying and after all the neglect, my dad would be physically abusive to our house, verbally abusive, like tear us down and say that we're like these terrible people because just anything, like you mess up the food and he would just like straight yell at you and like throw the food across the kitchen. And so it was really terrifying, and he would always just leave and be like, oh, I'm never coming back again. And he would overdose a lot. I remember multiple nights where I would go into my parents' room because I heard my mom crying and my dad wasn't like responsive at all. And so he would start shaking and like stop breathing. And I remember multiple times I had to get this like medicine sprayed in his mouth and pump on his chest so he would start breathing again. And this would last a really long time. But once 6th grade hit, it was that then the depression just got worse. I started having suicidal thoughts because of the neglect, because of the bullying. And I thought that, if I just conform myself to those people, that if I get them to like me, then I'll fulfill this void inside of me because I feel so empty. I started cutting myself, and I actually told the teacher. And then that day, they told me that I was being sent to the suicidal solitary place. Each day I would lie and say I was okay, because if you weren't okay, then they would keep you in there longer. Once I got out, I remember I had to go to therapy. I was put on depression medicine, but it didn't help like at all. And my parents were like, "Sweetie, I'm so sorry." They would cry and be like, "We're gonna stop fighting so much. We're gonna stop drinking." But the drinking actually still continued. I felt like that was like such a broken promise, and like so I just felt numb after that, because it was like, you don't care. My mom knew that we were in a really bad situation, and so she wanted to do something about it. She knew that she wasn't in the right place either. My brother and my mom were driving back up to New York, so they had a set plan that we were gonna leave. We were leaving my father. He had no warning, we had no warning. And as soon as we got like 3 yards down the road, my brother was like, he was driving, he's like, your guys' life is about to change. And like, I had like a sick feeling. I was like, I kind of already knew what was gonna happen. I didn't get to say goodbye to my friends. We were just up and leaving my dad. It was like a couple minutes later, my dad called my sister, and my mom was like in tears explaining to him what was gonna happen. She said that, if you go through rehab, we're gonna get back together and we're gonna start new. And he flipped out and he tried totaling the car and like killing himself. And we called the cops to make sure he was okay, and he was. I already had so much hatred in my heart from so much disappointment in my life, from friends breaking promises, from my family breaking promises. Like, it was so bad in my house. My family would promise, oh, we're gonna do this for your birthday, and then next thing you know, hundreds of dollars are gone because you spent it on drugs. My whole life, God wasn't in the picture. Like, my dad would either say, oh, if there is a God, why does this happen? Or he would just talk bad about God in general. And So I never had a good view of God or Christianity. So it was a couple months in, and my brother was like, let's try out some churches. He found this one, and so literally the first Sunday we came, we all looked at each other. We were like, oh my gosh, this is the one. And that was really weird for me because I didn't care for church, but this one I didn't care for anything else but the message. I surrendered my life to Jesus, and once I did that, my whole life started to change. And I look back and I didn't have my depression anymore, and no medicine, no therapist could ever cure my depression. I was this terrible person, yet he still loved me. Like that's like a love I never felt before. I never felt love at home. I never felt like appreciated or anything. And so I started high school, and day one I started talking about Jesus, and I've literally had people say, you're the reason I haven't killed myself, because you're so joyful and you give me this hope. And to me, that's the best thing ever, because I remember being in a position where I wanted everything to end, and now I can be that person that God's using to just help other people. And I did nothing to deserve it. I was such a bad person. I was a liar, I had hatred, I was a thief, I was, you name it, and I wasn't. But somehow he still had a plan and purpose for my life, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. Now that's love.